Hello everyone, and welcome to another fragrance review. Today we're going to be taking a look at a fragrance from the house of Tom Ford, and the fragrance is called Noir de Noir. Now this fragrance was released in 2007 when the line was introduced, and although the perfumer for this fragrance has not been made available to the general public, the creative director for this fragrance is indeed the man himself, Tom Ford. And from the information that I've done, the research that I've gathered, he is very involved in the decision making that goes on under his own brand. So the first thing that I want to mention is that this fragrance is called Noir de Noir. Now there's another fragrance simply called Tom Ford Noir, and I believe it's available in two concentrations, eau de toilette and eau de parfum. This is very different from that line. That line is part of the standard line of fragrances, which is found at lower end department stores like Macy's and whatnot, and that includes fragrances like Tom Ford Noir, Tom Ford for Men, Sahara Noir, Black Orchid, Black Violet, and along with a few others. This is part of the private blend line, which was released in 2007, and it originally included 12 fragrances. Some of them have been discontinued. This one, on the other hand, is still in production. The few that have been discontinued include Amber Absolute, Japon Noir, so on and so forth. So they've been recently introducing new lines. This one has stuck around. Now, with this fragrance, I do want to tackle the name a little bit, Noir de Noir. The literal translation, of course, it's a French name, and it translates to black of black. And while that does happen to be the literal translation, there are a few who argue over what the denotative meaning of that translation is. So some have said that it could mean dark of night or dark of dark, but that doesn't really make too much sense. Now, if I may take a guess at what I think the denotative meaning of the fragrance is, there's a type of wine called Blanc de Noir, and that literally translates to white of black. And what it basically is, it's a type of sparkling wine or champagne that's very light in color, but it's made from dark ingredients. That dark ingredient being the Pinot Noir grape. It's very dark red, almost black in color. And what happens is, if the skin is peeled right after it's pressed, it prevents the pigmentation from getting absorbed into the liquid. So the end result is a very light colored wine that's made from dark ingredients. And that's what I think Blanc de Noir means. So as far as this name goes, Noir de Noir, I think it means it's a dark fragrance made from dark ingredients, all the while making a relevant reference to wine. And those who have smelled this fragrance would agree that it does smell a little bit like wine. Now, I also do want to mention that there are some who say that this is arguably the most romantic fragrance made under the Tom Ford name, while others argue that this is probably the most romantic fragrance ever made. I'm going to let you know what I think, but next up, let's take a look at the presentation for Noir de Noir by Tom Ford. Noir de Noir by Tom Ford is available in three sizes: 50 milliliters, which is the one that you see here in front of me, 100 milliliters, and then the big 250 milliliter flacon. Just keep in mind, if you are looking at buying the big 250 ml size, it does not come with an atomizer, so just make sure you have the proper decanting materials like a funnel or a pipette in order to be able to wear the fragrance. Now, this fragrance is only available in one concentration, and that is eau de parfum. Now, I do apologize, I don't have the box for this fragrance. I actually bought this off someone who discarded the box. So if you're interested at looking at the presentation of a Tom Ford private blend box, I'm going to leave a link to my Champaca Absolute review in the upper left hand corner of the screen, so please check that out, and I do have timestamps in the description section. Now, as far as the bottle goes, it pretty much looks like other Tom Ford private blends. The only thing that really changes is the color and the sticker. This one happens to be black like other Tom Ford private blends, and then the sticker here says Noir de Noir. So you have the name of the company, the name of the fragrance, the concentration, the size below that. At the very bottom here, you have a sticker with some other necessary pertinent information like the size, the batch code, the ingredients, so on and so forth. And then here at the very top, you have the name of the company engraved in there. It says Tom Ford, and I do like how the gold embellishes the black. Now, the atomizer does have a pretty good distribution, not the best, and it doesn't spray out too much juice, but enough relative to the concentration of the fragrance, and that has pretty much been the presentation of Tom Ford's Noir de Noir. Now, what you're going to get from this fragrance as soon as you smell it is this very condensed composition. And I mean that in the sense that some fragrances I've sampled are very ethereal, very billowy, and they kind of just open up or expand on your skin. Bois d'Argent by Christian Dior being an excellent example, I think. This fragrance, on the other hand, as soon as you spray, it's kind of like this clump of ingredients. And I know there's another YouTube fragrance reviewer by the name of Lionel Woods who mentioned that, and I would have to totally agree. It opens up very condensed, very chunky, and then it starts to kind of etherealize on your skin. It's almost like in the intro, the notes are kind of fighting for each other over the dominant spot. And the rose note that's in this fragrance is always victorious. So I'm going to say that this is definitely a rose-based fragrance, and the rose is dominant. but it's a rose unlike the rose that you would expect. When I first looked at the note breakdown for this fragrance, of course there's rose, there's oud, there's saffron. I thought that this was going to smell like a Middle Eastern fragrance. And then once I sprayed it out, it's kind of like I had this aha moment where it was totally different from what my expectations initially were. So the rose that you're going to get in this fragrance is not very transparent. I don't think it's ultra feminine, but at the same time it's not very diaphanous. It's very dense, full-bodied. It's kind of chunky, almost sweet too. And that's another thing that I found quite unusual about this fragrance. As soon as you spray it, there's no denying that there's something almost chocolatey but sweet at the same time. I would argue that this is a very sweet fragrance, but never would I classify this as a gourmand. I guess in nature and in essence, this is quite literally a floral woody composition. I guess that's what the formal classification would be, woody floral, but there's something about it that's very sweet. Now, I know that patchouli is a note in this fragrance, and according to user votes on online fragrance forums, they say that oud is the most concentrated, or the second most concentrated note. I would actually disagree with that. I think that there's a very dominant, very present patchouli note. I don't think it ever overrides or supersedes the rose note, but I think it's definitely there. Now, I think that the patchouli has a lot to do with that chocolatey feel that a lot of people get, which is why a lot of people are so inclined to call this a romantic fragrance, and I can definitely see that. I mean, in the opening, it kind of reminds you of wine a little bit, like a very dark, rich red wine, maybe like a Cabernet Sauvignon or a Merlot. And then there's also this rose note that's very romantic, and then it also smells kind of like cocoa powder or chocolate. This is essentially Valentine's Day in a bottle. This is a very romantic fragrance, I think, for special occasions. But I think that the patchouli has a lot to do with that chocolate note that people perceive in this fragrance. Just because from my experience, the essential oils that I have smelled, I know that there are two varieties of patchouli. There's a light variety and a dark variety. It's really the dark variety that comes across smelling quite bitter, quite astringent, almost as if it's somewhat smoky. Can also give off like an incensey vibe, all the while being very dirty, very earthy. There's a light patchouli though that comes across also earthy, not necessarily as dirty, more leafy, but it's very dense and it kind of has like this chocolatey overtone. I think that that's what's going on in this fragrance. Now, I'm not going to doubt that it's only the patchouli that's giving off that impression. There could very well be like a chocolate or a cocoa note, because as soon as you spray it, in addition to that, you know, clumped up rose note that you get in the opening, there's also something that smells like melting chocolate or like a chocolate bar, really dense, really thick, really rich. And I really like that about this composition, because you look at the note breakdown, you expect one thing, you spray, you get something else. Now, of course, the vanilla might have a lot to do with it too. There's a very present vanilla note. I don't think it ever fully gets its chance to shine until it starts to dry down. But then there's also a spicy nuance about it. Now, it's not a spicy vanilla like you would get in Tobacco Vanille. I think the saffron has a lot to do with that too. It doesn't necessarily have an airy quality, because like I said, this fragrance doesn't necessarily smell billowy or ethereal. Rather, it smells kind of dense and compact and compressed. But I think that there's also something in there that's undeniably spicy. And I think the saffron may have a lot to do with that, but really the dominant players in this fragrance are the rose and the patchouli. Now, yes, there is an oud note in here, but if you're expecting a medicinal, harsh, almost smoky oud note, that's not what you're going to get from this fragrance. I think that the oud note in this fragrance is very well disguised. I think there's something noticeably woody about it, but it never overrides those other ingredients. So you're going to get an oud note, but it's similar to the one that you get in Oud Wood, which is also a Tom Ford private blend fragrance. Very inoffensive, very wearable. So the bottom line for this fragrance is that in the opening you're going to get this sugary rose, very sweet, but I wouldn't classify it as a gourmand. And then you have this chocolatey, dense patchouli note really supporting the rose all the time. And then as it starts to dry down, it's when that woody quality starts to come out with that vanilla. And if somebody were to lie to me and tell me that there was sandalwood in this fragrance, not oud, I would believe them, because it does have that creamy richness and that sweetness even after it starts to dry down. So that's the bottom line for this fragrance. Now, in terms of compliments or complaints, I'm going to say this fragrance is more likely to land you a compliment, but with one caveat. There are some who have said that this fragrance can smell a bit feminine. My girlfriend, when she smelled it, said she found this fragrance to be a little bit feminine. And I think that's a combination of different ingredients. Of course, patchouli is also traditionally found in a lot of women's fragrances, but so is rose. So whenever you smell that floral overtone that this fragrance really brings to the table, you're more inclined to say it's feminine rather than masculine. I think it's totally unisex, and I think it all depends on your personality. So if you're more metrosexually inclined, if you feel comfortable, you know, getting your eyebrows done and wearing skinny jeans, then I think you can pull this off no problem. but I think if you're a biker and you know you're that more masculine aggressive type, this fragrance may not be for you. Now, anybody could wear this fragrance, so of course sample it before you buy it, but just keep that in mind. I think that there are some people who would find this just a little bit feminine, but I think that this is a very unisex fragrance. It all depends on the personality. And lastly, have I worn this fragrance outside of testing? Yes, absolutely. I think that despite that, this is a very wearable fragrance. It comes across as very inoffensive, but also very intriguing. So even though you would expect it to smell like other fragrances, and yes, I would kind of agree that it kind of has that same chocolatey patchouli quality that Black Orchid had, not Black Violet, Black Orchid by Tom Ford also has, which is a women's fragrance, but at the same time very wearable, very romantic, perfect for a night out, perfect for a romantic dinner. So those are my thoughts on the smell of Noir de Noir by Tom Ford. Last up we have the rating. Take care. First up we have uniqueness and overall smell, and I ended up giving Noir de Noir by Tom Ford an 8 out of 10. I do think that this is a unique fragrance. It only barely reminds me of other fragrances, and the other fragrance that it does remind me of is another Tom Ford fragrance. So I think that this is unique enough to be ranked up there with Tobacco Vanilla and Tuscan Leather in terms of how different it smells. And I really do think that it caters to a particular crowd. Now, it's a great smell, it's intriguing. The only reason I did not give it a perfect score is because some people might be offended by it and some might find it to be just a little too feminine, but fixatives were used successfully, and I do think that a creative risk was taken with this composition, so I ended up giving it an 8 out of 10. Next up we have longevity. I give this fragrance a 10 out of 10. I get 10 plus hours every time I wear this fragrance. Even if you wash your hands, you're still going to find it lingering. You really have to scrub to get it out there. Excellent, above average to excellent longevity. I ended up giving it a 10 out of 10. Next up we have projection. I give this fragrance an 8 out of 10. Now the projection on this fragrance is also excellent, but it projects for about 4 to 5 hours. Starts to sit a little bit closer to the skin, but you're always going to have this tiny scent cloud around you when you're wearing this fragrance. It never sits so close to the skin to the point where it becomes imperceptible. It's always going to be noticeable. Excellent projection. I ended up giving it an 8 out of 10. Next up we have versatility. I really took it down a notch. I brought it down to a 5 out of 10. Now I still do think that this is a fairly unisex fragrance depending on your personality, but this is a romantic special occasion scent only. I would wear this formally, but definitely not casually, probably not even semi-formally. And then I think it also depends on the formal occasion in which you're going to wear this. It really has to be that romantic type of an occasion. Like I would wear it to a wedding, but I wouldn't wear it to a meeting. So you really have to think of the occasion as well and how you're dressed. And at the same time, I think that this is 25 and up. I think that there's a mature quality to it. So if you feel as though you're mature enough, you're attending the right occasion, your personality really coincides with the smell of this fragrance, go ahead and wear it. But of course, always sample before you buy and never blind buy. And I think in terms of seasons, this is a winter fragrance. You could perhaps wear it on a colder day in the fall, but I think that the performance is so good that if you wear this one in the hotter weather, it's really bound to choke somebody out, even with a couple of sprays. So I would recommend 2 to 3, 4 max sprays with this fragrance and you're good to go. And then lastly we have the presentation. I already told you what I feel about that. I ended up giving it a 7 out of 10, and then that brings this fragrance to an overall rating or an average score of 7.6 out of 10. So there you have it. That was my review of Noir de Noir by Tom Ford. If you own or have smelled this fragrance, please let me know what you think by leaving a comment down below. Also, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to shoot me a message. I will try to get back to you as soon as possible. So please don't forget to comment, rate, and subscribe. As always, thank you so much for tuning into my channel and watching my videos. This has been Steven with another fragrance review from Radolescence. Take care.